If you've ever stood in the middle of a meltdown, your heart racing, everyone's staring at you and thought, why is this happening again? Or will this ever get better? You're not alone. That fear of meltdowns can quietly take over your life. You start avoiding places, rehearsing every outing, bracing for judgment from strangers, or even more hurtful sometimes, your family. People who look at you like you should be able to control your child. And that pressure, it can push you to react in ways that go against your instincts. And sometimes it adds fuel to the fire. But meltdowns aren't power struggles, they're survival responses. And when you start to see them that way, everything about how you respond and how your child recovers can change. If you're new here, I'm Andrea Pollack. I'm a parenting educator and coach and parent of a young man who's 26 and autistic. So, been where you are. Let's get into it. I hear this a lot from parents. He has meltdowns when he doesn't get his way. And I do totally understand that it feels that way, but I want to share a different perspective with you that will help you respond differently and hopefully help you avoid many of these meltdowns altogether. In this video, I'm going to show you what meltdowns aren't and why they're not tantrums, although we'll talk about that distinction too. What's really happening inside your child's nervous system in those moments, and most importantly, what you can do instead, both in the moment and long term, to actually help. First, let's clear out what meltdowns are not. They're not tantrums, they're not manipulation, and they're definitely not your child plotting against you. It's important to know that there is no distinct line between meltdowns and tantrums. People are always asking for the clear distinction, but I'm going to try to articulate the basic difference. A tantrum is usually goal-oriented. It usually stops when the child gets what they want. A meltdown, it keeps going, oftentimes even if you give them the cookie or the toy that they were wanting that initiated the meltdown, because it isn't about getting something. It's about too much happening all at once. My belief is that tantrums are a rarity. Why do I say that? Because think about it. Tantrums are usually associated with like 2-year-olds, right? And yes, their behavior often starts when they don't get what they want, but not because these little people are manipulating you. It's because their nervous systems are not highly developed and their big feelings overwhelm their self-regulation skills. Let's use a story about the grocery store as an illustration. Say you're in a grocery store and your child begs for candy. Sure, we've all been there. You say no, and at first it really does look like a tantrum. They're throwing down on the floor trying to push for what they want. But here's where it gets tricky. Once those big feelings boil over, the thinking part of their brain shuts down. So what started as a goal-oriented tantrum can very quickly cross the line into a meltdown. And then you're stuck in the exact trap parents hate. If you give them the candy, you're afraid you're rewarding the tantrum or the behavior, whatever you want to call it. But sometimes, even if you do give it to them, at that point, it might not help because their system is already in full meltdown mode. So parents ask me, if I don't want to reinforce the tantrum and giving him might not even stop the meltdown, am I just doomed for a meltdown every grocery trip? No, that's the part we need to untangle, and I'll show you how to do it later in the video. I think it's really helpful to think about a meltdown as your child's nervous system saying, I can't handle this anymore. The body flips into fight, flight, or freeze, just like a smoke alarm that goes off at the faintest hint of smoke, whether there's a fire or not. And here's another tricky part. The skills we want our children to exercise in those moments, self-regulation, reasoning, calming down, those are the exact skills that aren't available during a meltdown. The expectation is there on our part, but the capacity isn't. That's why when your child loses control, it's not because they won't calm down, it's not because they're manipulating you, it's because in that moment they can't. And I know how hard it is to remember that when everything feels chaotic, because when you're watching your child fall apart, your own nervous system starts to go into overdrive too. You feel that surge of panic, that urge to fix it or to make it stop fast. But when both of you are dysregulated, connection is the first thing to disappear. I'll never forget a time I took my son to a Christmas movie. About 10 minutes into the film, he started screaming, grabbing me, pulling my hair, melting down. And at the time, I thought he was being willful, that he wanted more snacks or he didn't want to sit still. So I got firmer and more insistent, and it only got worse from there. We wound up having to leave the theater immediately. But later I realized it really wasn't about behavior at all. It was the sensory overload of the theater. The lights, the sound, the crowds, the sugar, all of it just pushed his system past what he could manage. And my response escalated things because I didn't yet see what was really happening. I guess I thought he should have control over himself when he didn't and couldn't. And that's such a common experience for parents, when your heart is in the right place, but your approach, without meaning to, sometimes makes things a little harder. Doesn't mean you failed, it means you're missing information. If you've ever walked away from a meltdown feeling like you lost control too, you're in good company here. That's not weakness, it's human. Your nervous system got triggered too. And the more you start to see these moments through the lens of capacity and not control, the more grace you'll have for both your child and yourself. So as parents, we get stuck in this very tricky web. We want to set boundaries, we don't want to give in, but meanwhile we feel eyes on us, other people thinking that kid just needs discipline. It's such a painful spot to be in, because our gut is saying something deeper is happening here. But the world around you is shouting, be firmer, stop giving in. So you're caught between what feels right in your heart and what everyone expects from you. And that pressure doesn't just come from strangers in the grocery store, it can come from family, teachers, even your own inner critic that whispers, I should be able to do this better. That's the moment where your courage matters most. Because choosing to stay calm, to see meltdowns as communication instead of defiance, that's not giving up control. That's choosing leadership over fear. Here's another story for illustration. I worked with a parent who insisted her child say thank you at a birthday party. Sounds reasonable. On the surface, it seems like a simple expectation, just good manners. But her child was already overwhelmed. The noise, the sugar, the excitement, all of the social interaction they had to navigate. So that push to just say thank you sent him straight into a meltdown. Here's the dilemma that the parents, again, that we often feel in this moment. If I don't insist, am I raising a rude child? But if I do insist, it might erupt into a meltdown that ruins that moment for everyone. So parents ask me, supposed to just let it go? How will my child ever learn manners if I don't make them practice? Let me know in the comments. Have you been there? It's such a common dilemma. Let's talk about it in the comments. It's a really fair question. So let's get into what actually helps when meltdowns happen, or ideally, before they even start. Let's start with a few principles you can rely on in the moment. First, stay calm yourself. I know, easier said than done, but with practice, we can do it. Your child's nervous system is borrowing yours. So if you escalate, it escalates them too. Second, safety first. Pull back demands, create space. Sometimes that means literally stepping away from the crowd or dimming the lights or just moving into a space where everyone is safe. Third, connection over correction. Words won't land in a meltdown. This isn't the time for reasoning or lessons. It's the time for safety and calm. And I know all this is easier said than done. When your child is screaming or hitting and everything in you wants to fix it, to stop it, to do something. But when you can anchor yourself, even for just a breath, you give your child the best chance to borrow your calm instead of panic. That is doing something, even if no one else can see it. So next you're probably thinking, okay, but what about situations I can't avoid, like the grocery store or a social event? How do I actually make this work in real life? So let's go back to the two examples. If you know this is a recurring struggle, then the key is to prepare for it beforehand, not just during it. So here's how you might prepare in advance. You can tell your child what to expect before even going into the grocery store, such as, we're going to buy groceries today. You can pick one snack from this list, but we're not buying candy at checkout. Second, you might try avoiding the trap itself. Whenever possible, skip the candy aisle or choose self-checkout. Sometimes prevention really is the best strategy. And you might also be able to find a middle ground. So bring a small candy or preferred snack from home. It meets the same need, something sweet, something predictable, something they chose without rewarding the meltdown itself. That way you're not giving into the explosion and you're not stuck bracing for one either. You're meeting your child's sensory and emotional needs before they boil over. And if the meltdown still happens, you have a plan for staying calm and helping them recover faster. Going back to the birthday party example, where the child couldn't say thank you, the fear many parents have is, if I don't insist now, they're never going to learn manners. But actually, the opposite tends to be true. Skills build best when your child feels safe and regulated, not when they're overlooked. So instead of insisting in the middle of the chaos, plan ahead. So before the party, preview what's expected and practice a short script. Maybe you could just have them practice beforehand. They can walk up and say, thanks for having me, on the way out. If they practice those words over and over, it might be easier for them to access them in that moment when their body is somewhat overwhelmed. You can also offer alternatives. If speaking feels too hard in that moment, let them wave, high five, or even nod. You can model the thank you for them if needed, and then circle back later when they're calm. Revisit the idea of gratitude together and maybe send a thank you text or draw a quick card. The teaching still happens, it just happens at a time when your child can succeed. This way you're teaching them the same values, gratitude, respect, kindness, but in a way that matches your child's capacity. You're not lowering expectations, you're teaching when learning is actually possible. So whether it's candy at the checkout or manners at a party, the pattern is the same. What looks like disobedience is often just a mismatch between the expectation and your child's capacity. And when we understand that, we can step out of the power struggle and into leadership, guiding them toward success instead of adding to the overwhelm. And that shift doesn't just change your child's behavior, it changes the energy in your home, how you see your child, how you see yourself, and how much peace feels possible again. Remember, meltdowns aren't about control, they're about capacity. And when you shift from trying to manage behavior to supporting regulation, everything changes. You start to see your child not as defiant, but as doing the best they can with the skills they have in that moment. And that perspective, your calm, your compassion, is what helps your child grow. I hope this gave you a new way of seeing your child's behavior. And if you know a parent who could benefit from this message, I hope you'll share it as well. If you want to go deeper on how to prevent meltdowns before they start, that's exactly what I help parents do in my coaching program. That and so much more. You'll find the link below. I hope you enjoyed this. Thank you for being here. Thank you for showing up for your child in ways that truly make a difference. I'll see you in the next one.